Are you already registered with Wikisana?
Hello and welcome to our natural medicine format. It's great that you've tuned in again. I have a wonderful interviewee today. Alexandra Kotthaus is with me. She is the head doctor at the Biomed Center in Sonnenberg. Today we want to talk about chronic illnesses. There are a large number of chronic illnesses. Conventional medicine is often left empty-handed when people say, "How can I make the shift and get out of this chronic condition?" But there are also solutions. There are solutions for everything. You just have to find them, and we'll take a look with Alexandra Kotthaus to see where we can find a solution for chronic conditions. Stay tuned. It will be exciting, as always. Dear Alexandra, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Today we're talking about chronic conditions. You are a specialist in general medicine, psychiatry, and psychotherapy. In your early career as a specialist or general practitioner, you will probably have been faced with the question of how to tackle one or the other chronic illness.
No. The problem wasn't actually that I asked myself that, because I actually wanted to go into alternative medicine even before my studies. But the patients asked. As a GP, for example, you don't have much to offer if they don't want to make a few lifestyle changes on their own accord. Or perhaps you have to invest a little in your health. And if you just say, "I'll only take what the health insurance pays for," then at some point you have to say that you've reached the end of the line. But there must be something. I had that discussion with some patients. Yes, they might have to do something about their diet, for example. I knew that one lady only ate frozen, ready-made meals. They perhaps have to do a bit of cooking themselves or change something. And that's just the one thing in response to your question. I already had ideas. I was actually broken by the fact that I couldn't implement them. That when I made home visits to nursing homes, respite homes, homes for the disabled, it hurt my soul how little I could do, how little I was allowed to do, what I could do because my hands were tied. But I had ideas about what I could have done to help them.
In many cases, as you've already indicated, it simply fails due to the fact that possible ways are often unaffordable. But I think there are always ways that you can still, as you say, change your own lifestyle. And when the arguments come up, yes, but then that's very expensive if I eat healthily.
For many people it would be a redistribution, or at least to get to a better level with a redistribution of money. Anyone could change their lifestyle a little if they wanted to. Let's leave out the worst fatigue syndromes for a moment. But I also have options here, if there is at least the will to start very carefully. But a bit of willpower and insight is useful if you want to get rid of your suffering. Or I have said that I would like to make a program called participatory medicine, because our medicine is actually a participatory medicine. That means it takes a certain amount of personal effort to get well. And there are sometimes patients where I have to say, let's take the prostate as an example. We can replace thamsolucin, which is the typical remedy for enlarged prostates when the man can no longer urinate so well, with prostatlan, a plant. This is something that works reasonably well, but in our view, it is not a treatment for the cause. And where we say who comes to us with the intention, we are a bit different. So when they come to us, we first assume that they really want to get well. And that means there are many things. Now, I've also had days with patients where I've said that they've had a lot. It was a course of cancer. They have realized that they can have a lot of influence on themselves. Over the years, they have noticed that it's not a very fast-growing cancer. They have noticed that if they do more sport, if they adjust their diet, the metastases have actually shrunk or grown accordingly. And that you simply learn to give the patient back their self-efficacy. And it's the same with other things. You can also influence many chronic illnesses, but if this knowledge is kept from them or drilled into them, oh no, there's not much you can do with nutrition, it's an autoimmune disease, then how should I put it? I disable the patient or even incapacitate the patient. And this is also something that is being heard more and more, that patients are literally being harassed and threatened with terrible fear scenarios. If they don't take the immunosuppressant, they'll be crippled in 3 years. And I don't think that's medical ethics. You can't talk to another person like that just because you might not have the solution yourself. But the patient is no longer respected as an independent entity. What does the patient want?
It's also about personal responsibility, which the patient also wants to bring with them. What is it like with your clientele? Is it fundamentally the case that the patient also wants to take responsibility for themselves?
Well, I'd say that those who make it all the way to us usually do. I don't have a particularly hard time with that. When I worked in conventional medicine and as a GP, it wasn't like that at all. I'm actually very spoiled with our patients. And there really are a lot of people who, I have to say, are perhaps not always motivated to get rid of their conventional medication for the right reasons. Some of our patients are at the other extreme, so to speak. We simply don't want any conventional medicine on principle. Perhaps that's not always the right way to go. Or sometimes I say, well, sometimes conventional medicine can also be the bridge, and we treat the causes in the meantime. Sometimes you need such a remedy, and sometimes you don't. Of course, we're always happy when it works without it. But if certain, for example, we are good at getting chronic pain under control and getting rid of it. But if someone has very acute pain that is perhaps not at a certain point because the intervertebral disc is pressing, where we then do neural therapy, or the neural therapy relieves, but is not enough on its own, then we have a few other options. But if they don't work, then conventional painkillers help more quickly.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I also think that the best of all areas in each individual case, so what is necessary in each individual case, can be a great combination. And it's good that many opportunities, or I hope that many people ultimately open up to these possibilities and move away from their extreme attitudes. Because sometimes that's probably the easier way or the only possible way to combine the two things, isn't it? If he has already achieved a corresponding progress. Or a degeneration, let's put it that way. The fact that with classical medicine...
No, thanks for the assit. No, it's not like that either. And that's the kind of thing that occasionally hits me like, well, then the knee is broken, for example. And I'm deliberately using a joint like that as an example, because then people think it's just broken, and then there's nothing more can be done. Then perhaps I can now reduce the pain with natural means, and that's it. And then we misunderstand the body. The body is not a car. The body is not a machine. If something in the car is worn out, it's worn out, period. Then it has to be replaced. But in our body, even in a knee, there are so many small living cells. Yes, even a bone is not just something like a steel rod. There are cells in it. Bone formation cells and bone resorption cells. Yes, at least. And that means it's alive. It's alive. Everything in us is alive, and everything in us is networked. And that means that if I do it right, I have a regeneration potential that should not be underestimated. Because it lives in our knee and it works. And now I have to treat the knee and everything in it very nicely with various options. And I also have to detoxify, because the body is totally intelligent. And if it somehow has the opportunity, the body is totally intelligent. And if it somehow has the option of not dumping the toxins in the place where they acutely endanger our lives, then it takes something like a joint. It's not quite as important for survival. Yes, then I just have to detoxify and then perhaps add substances to speed up regeneration. Then I might also work with things like local hyperthermia or neural therapy or who knows, acupuncture, and can also move and stimulate things. Or if I'm really clever, I look at what the knee is connected to. Yes, with which other parts of the body are there blockages, interference fields, obstacles to healing, which also influence healing in the knee, because it's not just one knee, it's part of a whole. And finally, you can also do something like injecting PRP into it to promote regeneration. And then you can not only delay knee surgery, in some cases you can also avoid it, either by reducing the inflammation in the body. So there are many possible approaches, but we mustn't look at it mechanically. We must not see our body as a car. That is so important.
Very good example. Thank you very much. I didn't mean it to be that extreme. It doesn't matter. The question led to a very valuable example and a very valuable comparison, I think. I completely agree with you.
And that's what I mean. There is a certain point where conventional medicine has to come in. We still have patients who stubbornly don't want that. We try to find a solution or escalate to therapies, magnetic fields, or hypothermia. Thank goodness we have the opportunity to respond to this. Originally, I just wanted to say that there are those who want to do it for me, right through to those who don't want to take any conventional medical poisonous stuff into their bodies. That's also the case for many people, that it's basically poison. So there are certainly things in the pill, things that don't need to be in there outside of the active ingredient, like titanium dioxide, which simply makes the pill nice and white. Then it just looks a bit healthier. So I always like to say that we are being led around by the nose from start to finish. Yes, of course, we don't really want that in our bodies, but sometimes there are acute situations where you just have to say it helps. Yes, and it's not the goal or the plan to take it long term. And things with chronic pain syndrome or chronic neuropathic pain, we actually get a foot in the door very well, but also for other chronic diseases. Chronic illnesses are simply a disturbed environment. I simply create conditions in the body that favor chronic diseases or inflammatory processes that do not run their course. For example, if someone injures their shoulder and the shoulder is simply very common, I've seen a lot of injuries, especially in a country with mountains, so skiing accidents. And the other thing is that shoulder problems as a whole are not uncommon, and that the shoulders may not be able to cope after a trauma that didn't have the potential to cause chronic problems. Then it's worth looking at what is the cause of the motor behind it. Is it chronic hyperacidity? Or yes, is it a blocked liver that is playing ping pong with the shoulder and not allowing it to heal? Because it also lies on the meridian, for example. If I can now do the same with my knee, I can also look further into my body to see what else is going on. For example, I treated my mother's knee pain for a while with neural therapy on the tonsils in her mouth. And we did a few other things, but I interrupted the pain in her acutely. Just as an example, it's not the first choice, but you simply have to think more systemically. And if something keeps causing problems somewhere after a trauma, even if it's a physical trauma that wasn't actually that bad, then problem usually is somewhere else. Then you're over-acidified. Maybe you have too many heavy metals or other toxins in you, or chronic viral infections. Stress, intestines, liver, these are things you should look at because this combination creates the environment for various chronic illnesses. It doesn't really matter which direction I go in. If the things I have just listed are disturbed, if they are out of control, then depending on the individual constitution, this can lead to autoimmune diseases and osteoarthritis. Sometimes it can also lead to depression, so the spectrum is very broad. But some people also think that, yes, we have more chronic illnesses because we are all simply getting older. Sorry, that's a bit mumpet. And illnesses are also affecting younger and younger people. At the moment, I'm also observing something really bad, I think, that more and more mothers of relatively young children are getting cancer because they are having children later and later. You almost have to say that I'm currently advising women to have children young and detox well beforehand. But the late childbearing at the moment is when a woman simply gets breast cancer in her mid-40s and the child is still only 4 years old. That's tragic. And it's becoming more and more common that I know of such combinations where the mother simply gets cancer between 40 and 50, but the children aren't actually grown up yet.
I actually have that in my circle of friends. Passed away 2 years ago.
And that's not normal. This amount of cancer diseases is not normal. This amount of cardiovascular disease is not normal. This amount of lung disease is not normal. And that's what we've done. Yes, an increase in breast cancer, not just because there are more women in the world, let's put it that way, but over the last 30 years there has simply been a serious increase. And at the same time, an increase in infertility and more fertility clinics. You have to take a look at yourself. Gynecologists also need to take a look at themselves. And if I have a child in an unnatural way, it can also have side effects. Then I can also cause cancer in the mother. As long as the children are not fully grown, or the child has a higher risk of sudden infant death syndrome or birth complications, if I do it the conventional medical way, with the desire to have children. So as you can see, it's a big issue.
What do you think is the main cause of all these chronic diseases?
In the broadest sense, I would tend to say our inappropriate lifestyle. Not species appropriate in the sense of air pollution, food pollution, soil pollution. I don't know what to call it. I was just going to say soul pollution. So the kind of stress we have, how we are put under pressure, how we live in a totally doped up society that is addicted to coffee. What I find terribly worse are these energy drinks that many people and young people drink to kick themselves and keep their heads above water. And the undeclared technical additives, pesticides, and xenoestrogens in our food, as we do with air and particulate matter. So if this is not even slowly becoming more important than nutrition, we also have the broad field of radiation. So we already have a variety of sources. The fact that the world is growing ever closer together, through air travel, through going abroad to work and across the continent, we also have a spread of germs that we weren't used to in the past. And the fact that you no longer marry the first person you meet means that you simply try things out more. And if it's just making out Epstein-Barr virus, it's also called kissing disease.
Oh, yes.
We simply have a much higher germ infestation, with many more germs per head than we used to have. And some of the germs don't come and go, they come and stay. In the case of herpes, you know that if you get cold sores here, you've just been under stress or have too much sun exposure or have a cold as well, and then it goes away again, and the person who has it knows, shit, if I have it again, it will come back. And that also means that you know the virus isn't out of your body. It's asleep, we think, so it lives on somewhere inside you and it's not dead and it's waiting for the next chance to thrive. And so does the Epstein-Barr virus, for example. Only we don't notice it. It's not as obvious as a cold sore. So chronic viral infections are playing an increasing role and are often still underestimated. Why is that? One is what I just said, making out, exchanging bodily fluids. But the other is that they also find an environment, the germs in which they can thrive. And the more toxins we have, the worse our immune system functions. So there's a lot that comes together. Then, of course, it's about detoxifying, doing something about the viruses, building up the immune system. Not to mention that our way of life is also a frontal attack on our microbiome. There's a study that says they just looked at 5G and they say it makes the E. coli overgrow. We don't need to imagine that. If 5G goes through concrete walls into basements, then it also goes through our bodies.
Yes, casually.
So that also plays a role.
Yes, it's always negated by the economy.
Yes, they know that we can figure it out and are now developing new tricks to rewrite things and toxins. So they realize that most people are becoming more aware and sensitive to these issues, even in the masses. And now instead of BPA, which is known to be a plasticizer in plastic, they write BPA free on the bottles, and instead they have BPF or BPS. Which is the same in green, or anti-caking agents in salt are now also under a different name, and there's no aluminum in the deodorant. They put something else in it. But we don't know that yet, so we can deceive people a little further.
So detoxification is a big keyword in this context.
Yes, detoxify. For me anyway, the answer to everything is 42, if you still know the book. Yes, but perhaps to make it a little bit more rounded with the non-species appropriate lifestyle, exercise, and seeing daylight are also part of it. Seeing daylight, I say in our internal training course. Well, we don't work in a species appropriate way either, and then our Biomed Center looks at me with wide eyes. How can you say that? We do organic work here and it's great. Guys, we have a blanket over our heads. I'm a doctor. What do I have? I actually have an office job. Yes, I don't go out anymore and collect the herbs myself for my patients. That's actually cool. That would perhaps be a real doctor and then prepare it myself. I'd have fun with that too, but then I probably won't be able to maintain the Biomed Center, or if we have all the doctors like that. Yes, we would do it that way, but that's part of it. The sunlight, that's real sunlight. It's by no means just about vitamin D. 50% of the sunlight spectrum is infrared. And if you know me a bit, I love infrared therapy in all its variations. So it's simply all very complex. And that's why it also plays a role when I say that we no longer live in a species-appropriate way.
And exercise means, at least that's how I understand it, not necessarily going to the gym. In other words, going from the office to the gym and then back home again.
Still better than nothing, but in the great outdoors is always better, of course. And what's also important is that there are no rigid movements. Don't go to a device that only does this or that, but sports. Or you should actually do different things. You could say that one part is cardio and one part is fascia training. So of course my favorite is also yoga. I welcome that, but there are also other things that are good for moving all the joints and fasciae. Or for one person it's qigong. That's what it's all about. But everyone can do that for themselves. Perhaps move each joint once in the morning and once in the evening as intended. By then doing it with your shoulders, you can do it. Not by force, but by moving everything from head to toe. Then the fascia is added. Then you add cardio training. Then you add muscle building. And then you can say, hey, if you have fun, maybe you'll do a team sport or a ball sport, where I don't just do regular clear movements, but where I also stimulate my brain and improve my overall motor skills and reflexes. So you could say, hey, you do cycling, yoga, and handball or something like that. It can be varied, but it doesn't have to be excessive either. It's almost a fitness craze at the moment.
And above all, everything you've just listed, moving your joints individually and stuff like that, it doesn't cost anything. Except a little time.
You can do that. And I really like having a flexi bar, which I often recommend. You know that bar?
Yes, I have it too.
And if someone can't do anything or has a bad knee and can't run or even go for a walk, then I say start with the flexi bar. Even 5 minutes will help. And you get the heart involved because the heart and lungs are shaken. And I've included muscle building, and mitochondria are cultivated, and I've included the lymph drainarga. But then I also say to the patients, I can't stack any lower. We still have to do that ourselves.
Exactly, yes. And pay attention to what you buy, what you eat, and so on.
Absolutely, my actual favorite topic. Yes, it's a complete package. You can start at many points.
Are there any chronic conditions where you basically say it's rather difficult once it's there? Is there actually little way back?
No, it doesn't depend on the illness. It depends more on how advanced the illness is and how poorly the person is regulated. But I would say that the whole thing is too individual for that. And because we simply say that we treat causes, and somewhere there are only limited causes for all diseases. And also something like, for example, adrenal insufficiency. We're actually already at the symptom level and no longer at the cause level. Just as an example, yes, I could also have this or that or Lyme disease in the candidate. In my opinion, we are already at the symptom level. And the cause level is even lower. That is our strength. That's where we start at the Biomed Center.
Yes, well, if we now have affected viewers, where can they find you?
Exactly, we are at the Sonnenberg Biomed Center in beautiful Schwelbrunn in Appenzellerland. And we have a team of several doctors, and we have nursing staff and therapists. And we can reach pretty deep into our bag of tricks to see what we can offer.
And our homepage is biomed-sonnenberg.com. Great, that's the most important thing. Then if you have a chronic condition, I ask about it, go there and take a certain amount of personal responsibility. deal it
I'd like that, yes.
exactly. And a willingness to change. Because especially with a chronic illness, if I keep everything the same as it is now, what's going to get better? If that has already led me there, into this position, into this situation. Thank you very much for this insightful conversation.
Thank you, Alexandra.
And for the hope that there is also a solution to chronic suffering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too for being here. And yes, you see, there are ways for everything. All roads lead to Rome. No, that's different. There's a solution for everything if you want it. And yes, you can also do small things that don't cost anything and that you just have to do. Perhaps you have taken something away from our conversation. I would be very pleased to hear that. And I would also be delighted if you tuned in again next time. Stay mindful, alert, and above all, please be kind to yourself and your body. See you next time.